She was crying on a tennis court in front of the entire world. And it wasn't because she lost. It was because for the first time in her life, she finally proved every single person who doubted her wrong. And what happened next is something nobody, not even her own family, saw coming. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why people are calling this the biggest underdog story in the history of women's tennis. And I promise you the ending of this story is not what you think it is. Before we go there, I need you to do one thing for me. If you've ever felt like the world set you up to fail, if you have ever been told you don't belong somewhere, if you have ever wanted to quit something you love because nobody believed in you, then this story is for you. And you owe it to yourself to be part of this channel when it happens. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me, but for her, for every kid out there who needs to hear this story. Because I promise you, once you hear how this girl clawed her way from nothing to history, you are not going to want to miss what she does next. Subscribe now. Because trust me, you do not want to find out later that you missed the moment everything changed. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because this story does not start with fame. It starts with a girl in Manila who nobody outside her own family had ever heard of. Her father, Mike, had no background in tennis at all. Her mother, Riza, used to swim competitively at the Southeast Asian Games, so there was athletic talent in the blood. But nobody in that family knew the first thing about building a tennis champion. There was no grand plan. There was no academy waiting for her. There was just a little girl who fell in love with hitting a ball over a net, and two parents who had no idea what they were about to walk into. Here is what almost nobody talks about. When a young player comes out of Poland or Spain or Kazakhstan, she is stepping into a machine that has been building champions for decades. The coaches exist. The academies exist. The funding exists. The roadmap already exists. When this girl from the Philippines decided she wanted to be a professional tennis player, none of that existed for her. Not one woman from her country had ever cracked the world's top 100. Not one. While other nations were producing Grand Slam champions generation after generation, her country did not even register on the tennis map. And she knew it every single time she stepped onto a court against a girl who had been training in a 5-star academy since she was 5 years old. But here's the part of this story that actually breaks your heart if you sit with it. For years, she was losing. Not the noble kind of losing where you're close every time. Real, painful, soul-crushing losing. Ranked outside the top 300, then outside the top 250. She would win a match, feel a flicker of hope, and then walk into a top seed from a tennis powerhouse and get destroyed, over and over. And in her head there was this voice, quiet at first, then louder every single year, whispering that she started too late, that her country didn't have what it takes, that she simply did not belong in the same conversation as these other girls. And it wasn't just the losing that hurt, it was the money. Every tournament costs money to enter. Every coach costs money. Every flight, every hotel room, every hour on a practice court. It all adds up, and it was her family footing that bill year after year, with nothing to show for it but a ranking that refused to move. Imagine looking your parents in the eyes and telling them you're not sure the thing they've sacrificed everything for is ever going to happen. Imagine carrying that weight every single day. That is where she was living for years. And I want you to really sit with that for a second, because we are about to get to the part where it almost ended completely. By the time we reached 2023 and into 2024, she was still stuck outside the top 100. The commentators had started saying out loud now that she would never make it, that she had started too late, that she simply did not have what the other girls had. And the terrifying part is that she was starting to believe them. There was a moment, somewhere in that stretch, where she had to sit her own family down and admit she didn't know if this was ever going to work. That is rock bottom. That is the moment where a career and a dream could just quietly ended, and nobody would have blamed her for walking away. But she didn't walk away. And what happened next is the reason we're even talking about her today. So stay with me here, because this next part is where everything flips. She made one decision that changed the entire trajectory of her life. She went to train under the philosophy of one of the greatest tennis players who has ever lived. Now, on paper, that might sound like just another coaching change, but it wasn't, because for the first time, Someone at the very top of the sport looked at her, not at her ranking, not her losses, but at her and said, "I see something in you." And if you have ever needed just one person to believe in you, when the whole world was telling you no, you know exactly how powerful that moment can be. Then came March of 2025, and this is where the story stops being sad and starts becoming unbelievable. She gets a wild card into a major tournament. She is still ranked around 70 in the world. Nobody is talking about her. And in the quarterfinal, she draws the world number 2, a 6-time Grand Slam champion, one of the most dominant players on the planet. Every single person watching expects this to be a formality, a nice experience for the underdog before she goes home. Except she walks onto that court with absolutely nothing to lose and everything to prove. She comes out swinging from the very first point. She is aggressive. She is fearless. She is playing like she has already won a dozen Grand Slams instead of 0. The first set is over almost before anyone can process what's happening. The second set goes to a tiebreak, and in that tiebreak, with the whole world watching, she does not blink. She closes it out. She beats the world number 2. And when that final point lands, the cameras catch her face, and she is in tears, not from relief, but from something deeper, the feeling of finally, after everything, being proven right. And here's the part one wants you to remember, because it comes back later in this story in the most dramatic way possible. Weeks after that win, she makes it all the way to another tournament final, and she is one single point away, for separate championship points, from winning her very first title, and she loses it. She lets it slip through her fingers in the most heartbreaking way imaginable, and she admits later that she cried so hard afterwards she couldn't even bring herself to watch the replay. A year earlier, that loss would have destroyed her completely. But something in her had already changed. Instead of spiraling, she turned it into fuel. She went on to win her first ever professional title not long after. Then she took down a top 5 player in the world. Then another top 10 player in the very same tournament. Her ranking, which had been stuck outside the top 100 for years, started climbing. 70, 50, 40, 32, in a matter of months. And then Wimbledon arrived. And this is where it gets almost too perfect to be real. Because in the draw, who does she face again but the very same player who broke her heart in that final? The same match she couldn't even watch back. And this time there was no heartbreak. This time she did not just win. She absolutely dismantled her, closing out the final set without letting her opponent win a single game. That is not just a win. That is a message sent to everyone who ever doubted her. By the time she walked off that court, she had done something no woman from her country had ever done in the entire history of the sport. She had reached the 3rd round of Wimbledon. And if you think that's the end of the story, I need you to keep watching, because it absolutely is not. Because on the 4th of July, the draw handed her the biggest test of her entire career. Not just another opponent, the defending champion, the very same 6-time Grand Slam winner she had shocked back in March. Except this time it is not a quarterfinal, at a smaller event with nothing on the line. This time it is Wimbledon, the biggest stage in tennis, and everything is on the line. Now here is why this story is bigger than one player in one tournament. And I need you to really understand this part. For decades, women's tennis has been owned by the same handful of countries. The same tennis powerhouses producing champion after champion, while dozens of other nations never even got a seat at the table. What this girl is doing right now is proving that theory wrong in real time. She is proving that greatness does not require a perfect system, a rich federation, or a century of tradition behind you. It only requires one person refusing to quit when every single signal around them says to stop. And that matters far beyond her own career. Because right now in her home country, there are thousands of young girls picking up a tennis racket for the very first time. Not because someone told them they could do it, but because they watched someone who looks like them, who came from exactly where they came from, actually do it. That is not just one athlete's story anymore. That is the beginning of an entire generation believing something is possible that was never possible before. This is exactly the kind of moment that changes a sport forever. The kind of moment that decades from now people will point to and say, that is where it all started. And here is the part that should genuinely give you chills. She is only 21 years old. She has been playing at this level for less than a year, and she has already beaten multiple top 10 players, and reached a Grand Slam quarterfinal stage that most professionals never sniff in their entire careers. So the real question isn't whether she belongs anymore. She has already answered that question in the most emphatic way possible. The real question is how far this actually goes. What does her ranking look like in 2 years? What happens the next time she walks onto a court against the very best player in the world with a whole tournament on the line? I want to know what you think happens next. Do you think she pulls off the upset against the defending champion? Do you think this is a tournament where she goes even further than anyone imagined? Drop your prediction in the comments right now, because I promise you, whatever happens next in this story is going to be talked about for years. And if you don't want to miss the moment it happens, make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to be covering every single match, every twist, and every piece of history as it happens, live in real time, and trust me, you're going to want to be here for it.